Chair, we do have questions from Adra Omachi from Business Day. The first one, what is the way forward in terms of appointing a U.S. ambassador? And then the second one, did President Ramaphosa make calls to try and secure a trade deal for South Africa with the U.S. last week? And then the other one to Minister Lamola in particular, since Lady R, which granted was an economic sabotage to South Africa's stance on Israel, little has been done to fix SA and US relations, and is South Africa now paying the economic price? And then the other one, the agricultural industry, specifically the citrus sectors, they are saying that they have not been consulted at all. And then the other questions come from SABC, Lihlohonolo. The first one, are the ministers at liberty to disclose their trade proposal to the US? And the final question also, is this not an opportunity for South Africa to rethink its international allegiances, in particular with Iran?
Are those all from the virtual? Okay. Any more inside the room? I'll note 3 from inside the room. Let's go. Ndogozo. Gentleman in the grey jacket at the back, and gentleman over here. If you can start this up.
Good morning, Ndogozo from Newsroom Africa. I don't know if Minister Dow can give us any insights on sort of how the support desk has worked since it launched, the sort of businesses that we are seeing come on there, as well as in terms of township businesses that were getting export ready. Will the Transformation Fund dip in to assist them get into that export market? But also a slight change in the sort of language that we used when it comes to describing the support desk. Before it was launched, it was clear that the focus really was on US tariffs, and now it seems the focus is on the rest of export markets while still assisting with the US tariffs. If we can get maybe just clarity if there's a change in what our focus is as we continue the negotiations with the US. And then to Minister Lamola, you mentioned something about speaking to the Competition Commission. Do we have any of that concern around fast-tracking intra-Africa trade and getting the agreements going? Because it does take time to make things work. Will there be any competition issues on the continent? Thank you.
Colleagues, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, because there's quite a few questions now, I'm going to allow the team to respond. Ministers, I'll also allow you to defer to your technical teams in this round, if you so wish, and then we'll come back for one more round at the end of that. Okay, Mr. Willem van der Spey, our Acting Deputy Director General for Exports at the DTIC.
Good morning, everyone. From the help desk side, it became active on Friday, and we've been fielding some calls from exporters specifically. Most of the exporters have been from the Western Cape. The key questions that there was clarification asked is with regards to when the tariffs come into effect. Also, there was also interest in terms of some of the products which are not covered within those tariffs which will be coming into effect. There were also questions around the shipment which are on water and the implications of those ones, so we've been giving clarifications around that. There's also a lot of interest shown in terms of the support measures, financial support measures, which I think was touched on today, to give further information around that. And then also, we are also continuing to give updated information in terms of the negotiations. They were interested in what is happening with the negotiations. I think we've touched upon that as well. I think also important point to raise is to say, while the desk is giving information, the primary focus of the desk is really to assist companies to enter new markets and diversify those markets. And we want to work with them systematically over the short to medium term to offer them new markets, but also as general for the country to diversify its markets as well. So the issue is to create resiliency in our international trade environment. And through this support desk, we will have practical areas of cooperation. We'll link them up with embassies, we'll link them up with potential buyers. We will also deal with the issues and take the journey with them in terms of some of the barriers, sanitary and phytosanitary issues. We'll also work with other parties around it. So it is a systematic process for us to really support them to look at different markets. Some companies, for example, have opportunities in other markets which they can advance. Others are looking at new markets. We're also assisting with that and engaging with them on those markets. And we're also looking at some of the key sectors, for example, which are affected by the tariff specifically, that we're working with those companies as well.
Thanks, Minister. Yeah.
Let me just deal with the ambassador thing. Yeah, thank you very much. The question from Harja with regards to how far we are on the appointment of an ambassador. Let me preface it by saying that we had an ambassador in the US, and that ambassador was expelled. So President Ramaphosa has always prioritized the US in terms of an ambassadorial responsibility. So the fact that our ambassador was expelled means that the new process to appoint the ambassador will not be as easy as it would have been when an ambassador would have not been expelled. We have to take all careful consideration, all due diligence, and I can confirm that that process is at an advanced stage, and the President at the right time will announce who will become the ambassador of South Africa in the US. But I will mention that this will not be dictated to by anyone to the President. He will do so in line with his powers as provided for in the Constitution. Obviously, he may consult whoever he may deem necessary and prudent to consult to appoint this ambassador. But the process is at an advanced stage, and at the right time he will make the announcement of the ambassador. I must also hasten to mention that while ambassadors do play a role to point to the key players, decision makers and so forth, ambassadors do not negotiate any trade deals. The trade deal is being negotiated under the leadership of DTIC, obviously with our coordination and support from DERCO. So they are the people negotiating the trade deal. It's not our ambassador in Washington. We do have a charge affair in Washington, who is the senior person for South Africa there, who does play a role from time to time to point there and there, but they do not negotiate the trade deal as it is being suggested in some quarters, that the fact that we don't have an ambassador might have affected us not coming up with an agreement. It's not correct description. There are countries that do have ambassadors in Washington. They don't have a trade deal. So the trade deal is negotiated by the relevant line function department, and in this instance in South Africa is the Department of Trade and Industry, which we are providing the support for, including our charge d'affaires in the US, who does from time to time point to the relevant people. So we do not think that the absence at this stage of an ambassador in Washington does impact on South Africa having any agreement or no agreement. Because if that was the case, all the countries that have ambassadors in Washington, they won't be having the same challenges that we're having. So this is a global phenomenon. It's not a South African problem. It's a challenge that the whole world is facing with the trade tariffs that we're dealing with. Lady R, I thought that the issue of Lady R was dealt with. There was a commission of inquiry. It made its finding. It was a non-issue. So it's no longer an issue now, and we will not want to speculate that Lady R has come back to this discussion unless someone brings it on the table. At this stage, it has never been raised as an issue. Whether we want, is this not an opportunity for South Africa to rethink its international allegiance, particularly with with Iran. Again, it's part of those conspiracies and propaganda that Iran has paid for our case in the ICJ, which you as journalists in South Africa knows that the South African government pays for this case. It is public knowledge. It is declared in all the documents of parliament. There is no Iran that has paid the ICJ case on behalf of the South African government. Neither is there big trade relations between South Africa and Iran to really put on the table. So it's neither here nor there as an issue, whether the issues of BEE and so forth, as I've said earlier on, they have not been brought to the table. So we can't speculate, but you know the position of the South African government with regards to BEE. It's a constitutional imperative, affirmative action. It's a constitutional imperative. Given the history of our country, it remains very important and strategic that we continue to transform the economy to reflect the demographics of our country. So this is a measure that remains a constitutional imperative for this country to continue on this path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ambassador Xolelwa Mlumi-Peter, who is our Deputy Director General for Trade at the DTIC.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ministers. I'll respond to the issue with regards to consultations with the affected industries. The DTIC, as well as the Department of Agriculture, has been consulting with all affected industries, including the citrus industry, through various platforms. We had, for example, a NEDLAC meeting as late as Friday last week. But also throughout this process, we have been engaging the business associations, but also the affected industries. So we will continue to engage, and also the industries themselves have also been sending proposals to us in terms of how, one, they are affected, and two, how we can assist them. So we will also continue to engage with the citrus industry. In terms of trade proposals to the U.S., as Minister Lamola has indicated in the statement, it covers a number of issues that the U.S. has raised as critical. One, the issue of the trade deficit, even though we do not, of course, agree with the manner in which the trade deficit has been calculated, and the fact that the trade deficit that South Africa has with the U.S. arises from the fact that we export critical minerals. So the contributing factor is critical minerals that the U.S. needs for its industries. Secondly, it's as a result of exports of agriculture, which of course the U.S. also needs because we are in counter-seasonal production seasons. So as Minister Lamola has indicated, this closes the gap in the U.S. market and therefore does not pose a threat. But regardless of that, we've identified what we need to do in order to respond to the trade deficit, and we've identified products that we can import from the U.S., including LNG. We've also looked at areas where there are non-tariff barriers with regards to agricultural exports, and with the Department of Agriculture, we've also responded to that. We've also identified areas where we can invest in the U.S. economy and made a commitment of $3.3 billion that can be invested by our companies. So as Minister Lamola has indicated, what we've put forward is comprehensive, is ambitious, and covers all the critical areas of interest to the U.S., including tariffs, which of course will be negotiated with SACU as well. In terms of the Competition Commission issues and the impact on intra-Africa trade, I think the important point to raise is that intra-Africa trade remains absolutely important for South Africa, and we are looking at fast-tracking the implementation of the AfCFTA, including resolving the outstanding issues. We already have markets that are open for South Africa to take advantage of, and we've seen a rise in exports through the AfCFTA. Between February and July, our exports to through the AFCFTA have reached over 1 billion rands. So you can see that a lot of our exporters are taking advantage of the new market access opportunities. But with regards to competition issues, we already have a competition protocol that has been concluded under the AFCFTA that ensures that we are able to have a coordinated mechanism to address anti-competitive behavior and ensure an inclusive continental market. South Africa has already ratified the competition protocol. It was ratified by Parliament last month, and therefore it is fully operational. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Before you come in, I just want to ask our Acting Deputy Director General for Transformation and Competition, Ms. Susan Mangole.
Thanks, Camille, and thanks, Ministers. Just in terms of the question that was raised to say whether there will be support to SMMEs and township businesses to diversify, I think one of the statements that Minister Lamola has made is that through the Competition Commission, we are going to be publishing the draft block exemption for exporters. So this is to mitigate against the impact of the increased tariff, as well as to make sure that the South African businesses, including those in the township, are actually diversifying in other markets. So the reason for this is that we want to help them to actually collaborate and coordinate. Yes, we are looking at a package that will also include using part of the transformation fund to be able to assist those businesses to diversify into new markets.
No, that's fine. Our Director General, Mr. Simpiwe Hamilton, from the DTIC.
Morning, Ministers and members of the media. Minister, I think the one question we had not answered is the one that relates to the number of jobs likely to be affected. We base this on the ongoing consultations that we have with all the sectors of the economy, from automotive, agriculture, and all the other sectors that are going to be impacted. And at this stage, we are sitting at approximately 30,000 jobs that could be affected by this if it were to be mismanaged in any manner. But we are looking at 30,000 jobs that could be affected at this stage.
I did promise two colleagues in the room that I'd take their questions, and then we'll call it at that. So the gentleman in the grey at the back, and so you've been answered. Okay, so I can give one question away. Okay, yeah, in grey over here. Thank you.
Simon Majalibodi from the Independent Media. My question is that Minister Lamola said it was unfortunate that this government's efforts in resetting relationship with the U.S. has been underestimated and undermined by some actors within the society. Could you please maybe clarify to us who are you specifically referring to, and what actions will be taken against those people? And what will happen if, despite all these actions, the U.S. doesn't budge on the figure? Does the company have a plan B? Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Saeed from Phoenix TV, China. And I just want to talk about the opportunity that this tariff is going to bring, which is like after this imposition of the U.S. tariffs, it's not only on South Africa as well as on the other African countries. There has been a renewed momentum about the African Free Trade Agreement. And my question here is, does South Africa have a clear plan to work with the fellow African countries to revitalize this initiative, as well as as a way of jointly mitigate the impact of this tariff?
Thank you. I've got one more question on this WhatsApp, and then I'll hand over to the team, Ministers, DGs, to answer. So it says, regarding South Africa's relationship with Israel, will there be an opportunity to improve on this in any possible way, given the Trump administration's very favorable stance towards that country? Minister Chow, if I can ask you to come up and answer the question directed at you, and then Minister Lamola, DG Dango, if you take the other question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kamel didn't give me a choice this time. The load was eased earlier from the department. Part of what we were communicating today was in relation to the work that you're doing, and I don't want to call it a plan B, but the work that we're doing in accelerating access to alternative markets, providing support to industry, to access those markets, talking to buyers, but also what support packages we can provide to South African industry to enable them to navigate this complex environment. We are going to Cabinet on Wednesday with a set of more detailed proposals that we are finalizing with sister departments that would elaborate on the structure of the support package. But we've been working with the industry and sister departments in finalizing what that should look like. And I'm sure, subject to Cabinet and additional proposals and ideas put on the table at Cabinet, we'll be able to communicate what that package looks like finally after Cabinet on Wednesday. And I'm sure colleagues know how Cabinet communicates its decisions. With regards to the to the Africa, excuse me, I tried not to speak earlier because this was going to happen, but I didn't. With regards to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we are working with our colleagues in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As indicated earlier, we have also ratified various protocols. We are accelerating work to address what are some of the niggly issues that need resolution, including issues on rules of origin with regards to the auto sector, clothing and textile. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in relation to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So certainly I think that we should be able to make progress. There is a realization amongst colleagues that in fact it is important that we address what are the impediments to the implementation of cross-border trade, because I think all of us are committed to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There are issues that impact cross-border trade, such as logistics, such as certain rules and regulations that make it difficult for countries and investors to be able to invest in particular regions and or countries that we are working on. So these are matters that are receiving attention. I think I've covered everything that was affected. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Minister. DG, sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay, I thought Minister Chow was offering to answer that question. No, I think the question around our relationship with Israel, it's important to put it into context. South Africa's actions from the start has always been to prevent and end a genocide. And that's in line with the Genocide Convention. And the question comes at a time when most countries, even those who were initially very critical of ours, are taking practical actions to now stop the genocide. We see actions coming from the European Union, including statements from about 24 foreign ministers, and former European ambassadors have also raised their voice. So we see that what we warned about in January 2024, in March and again in May, that the outcome, the humanitarian consequences, is not the result of the war. It's actually the objective of the military action is now coming to fruition. It's not something that we are happy about because unfortunately this is what we've been trying to prevent. So we will continue to try and stop this genocide through diplomatic and legal means. But now we are being joined by larger sectors of the international community, and largely all wanting the same thing, to end or to prevent further deaths in Gaza.
Yeah, I think the last one relates to, I thought I'd already answered it, but because it has been asked again, that there are players who have undermined our efforts and all that. I've said that our view is that all of us as South Africans, irrespective of our political affiliations, whether you're an opposition, NGO, business, or in government, GNU, partner, or anything, once you get out of South Africa, we all have a responsibility to promote the national interest of South Africa in a positive way, particularly when stakes are high, like now, during these complex negotiations with the US. And it is against this background that I said that the approach that the President and the South African government has taken of being measured, of refraining, even sometimes out of extreme provocation, is on the basis of the understanding of what is at stake. Jobs, livelihoods, and the economy. And our focus is to preserve that. And in this case is to continue with this mutual beneficial relationship with the US while we continue to diversify across the markets in the globe, which we have already outlined how we are doing it. But this should not only be in the hands of government. Other stakeholders and role players also have a role. State actors and non-state actors also have a role to promote the national interest of South Africa, so that we can all preserve the jobs, we can all preserve the economy, we can all act in the interest of South Africa Inc. That is the message we want to leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That concludes our press conference. We've pulled the two ministers out of a very important meeting, so we will then allow them to go back. I'm sure that really shows the press conference is over. Thank you, colleagues. We will then keep in touch for other engagements.
All right, so that's Crispin Piri rounding off this marathon of a briefing that's taken place in Germiston, South Africa's official response to the 30% tariffs from the United States, which technically are in place but are likely to be felt in less than a week when they're actually enforced. And the substance of South Africa's position hasn't changed, but I think there's been a slight adjustment in the tone of South Africa's approach moving forward. So we're still told that Pretoria is working on getting a deal over the line with the United States. They're working on those negotiations and engagements at both a political and trade level. But there's been a lot of emphasis in this briefing about Plan B, finding those alternatives. There was a considerable amount of time spent talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which was ratified in 2018 and enforced the following year. That essentially is meant to create this one market in Africa, which, if in fact it were to be implemented as envisioned, would be quite substantial and impactful. But because of a whole host of issues around governance on the continent, we're not really seeing its impact, at least from where I'm standing as a layperson. But there's also been mention of the China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement, and this was in response to a question about why we don't just open the floodgates with countries like China, which we know also have a considerable amount of a market share, if you like, in terms of global trade. And the response to that was that this particular agreement is already in place, but it's not as simple as opening the floodgates, because what you also don't want is to continue the dynamics of there being an imbalance between countries. In other words, we know South Africa and Africa, broadly speaking, typically exports minerals. China will then export minerals. China will then send back finished products, and you don't really want that arrangement to be sustained if you want countries on the continent to industrialize, for example. And so those are some of the things that still need to be spoken about. But I found the remarks from the International Relations Minister quite important at the very beginning. He spoke about there being a need to conclude a deal that is beneficial for both countries, a value add, and not a deal that will see to the extraction of value from the country, and went as far as saying something that would resemble the apartheid or colonial era extraction dynamics. So again, position hasn't changed, but the tone certainly has. We've also seen South Africa saying that, our exports to Pretoria, to Washington, are actually not a threat to U.S. industries. In many instances, they are counter-seasonal. In other words, when we produce, citrus, for example, it's usually at a time where similar industries in the United States aren't producing citrus. So there isn't really a direct competition, if you like. And I suppose that's all painted the picture around whether or not the decision from Washington is rational to begin with. We've also heard a repeat about how the calculations are illogical. The US certainly having a whole lot more of a trade surplus than what is being admitted. And there was also time spent on responding to whether or not this is actually about other non-trade related issues, right? Is it about South Africa's transformation laws, including the Expropriation Act? Is it about those claims of a white genocide in South Africa? Is it about the genocidal intent case at the International Court of Justice? And you certainly get the sense that the South African government is really starting to move past that, because I don't think anything is going to change insofar as those issues are concerned. The question is, what do we do now? So we'll continue listening into that, of course, in the context where we're told that there will be support for some of these export companies in South Africa that are likely to be affected. And I think it's worth emphasizing that nobody really knows the extent of that impact. We're only going to see it once it happens, which I suppose is unsettling in and of itself.